Do I have a good client and do I have their trust? It's something we go through with every single deal we're working on, every single client we have. It's something we ask ourselves, and if at any point we feel like we don't have a good client or we don't have their trust, then I bring it up to the agents and they explain to me, and I tell them to have a conversation with their client and figure out if they do have a good client and if they do have their trust, and then we can move forward. If not, we end up parting ways with the deal, and yeah, very, very politely, if we, don't have the trust and they're not being responsive, we let them know, hey, we haven't heard from you. We're going to be closing your file here at the Amazing Brokerage. Please reach out if there's anything we can help with in future. Then there's two things that happen at this moment. Either they come back and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, this, that, and the others happened, or they just leave it, where at that point you've saved yourself an awful lot of time, effort, and heartbreak dealing with somebody that doesn't want to deal with you. So what is a good client? First and foremost, a good client is what we call a top 20% client. I'll go into wants and needs in a different video. That's a whole separate video, which I'll put the link below for you to click on. But it's essentially somebody that needs an apartment, right? They need an apartment. They need it within the next 3 months. This is the profile for a good client. They need an apartment. They need it within the next 3 months, and they are credit worthy, and they are within budget of the market. So what does that mean? Quite simply, they can afford the apartment they're looking for. There's a bunch of different ways which I'll go about in different videos in order to determine this. But let's say, for example, they have a $1,500 budget, initially, like for our areas, which Frisco, Plano, my office is in Frisco. I know immediately when they say they've got a $1,600 budget, we've got a good, clean budget that we know we're going to be able to get them into. Then you have to figure out do they have the credit score in order to get approved? Do they have any issues with any prior apartment complexes? Do they have any felonies or anything that's going to stop them? Any large dogs? Anything that's going to stop them, right? This doesn't make it a bad client, but this makes it a client with what we call considerations, and then there's different strategies, which I'll post the video links below as they're done, which is how to deal with a client with bad credit, how to deal with a client with large pets, right? How to deal with a client with felonies, and how to help them, right? How to help them through those. But for the most part, is you have somebody that's looking for or at something that they can afford, and they need it, right? And then once you have that, you will know from the first phone call if you have their trust. It can be called two ways. We've worded this two ways within the brokerage. Do you have their trust, or do you have control of the situation? I don't really like the word control, but really what I mean is, are they listening to you? If you say, no, that's not a good idea, or that's not a good apartment, are they listening, or do they think you have some ulterior motive? So what I found, most people on the phone, everybody we've talked to, don't really know exactly how the industry works. So there's always this little bit of holding back, right? Because they're like, oh, is this person trying to sell me on this individual apartment, or do they have a deal, or how does it work? So I always explain to them, and I'll go through in different videos the phone calls, but I always explain to them, look, we're a completely independent service. I always say to them, I own a real estate brokerage, I'm a local realtor. And what I say to them, we always call every client a month. We stay in touch with all of our clients, but we always call them a month after they've moved in. And what hasn't happened yet on that month in phone call is somebody go, oh my God, why have you put me into this place? I absolutely hate it. You've given me, a terrible option here. That has not happened to us yet. I'm not saying it won't happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So I tell every client this hasn't happened yet, quite simply because I work with the apartments that I physically seen, I've put people into before, and I would recommend for friends and family. Now, if you haven't put people into said apartment before, you could say, look, I would recommend this to friends and family. I would personally live there, and I haven't heard anything detrimental to the apartment complex. Now, all apartment complexes pretty much have bad reviews. 90, even the best ones we've worked with, they have bad reviews. So what we found is out of the hundreds of people they have living there, there's always going to be bad reviews. So what we found, what we say to them is, look, the people we've spoken to have not had a bad experience there yet, and they all have bad reviews, or they all have had issues, normally because very stressful and personal situation moving into somewhere. It's very difficult for people. So there's always going to be some sort of, which they will bring up, right? So the question is, when you say to them, look, these are the best apartments within this area, do they trust that statement? And if they don't, you've already lost the client from that initial phone call. So what we train every single day, day in, day out with our apartment locators is what we call the first touch, which is a personal touch, which is communication, which is calling them and initially establishing yourself that you know what you're talking about, you know the area, you know everything there is to do with apartments, you've been seeing these apartments day in, day out, and you will help them get the absolute best deal. You are a free service, and on top of that, you will not, to stake your reputation on it, ever put them in an apartment that they will come back and have a negative experience. You will do everything in your power. You may not be able to control that, but with all your power and knowledge, you will not put them into an apartment that you wouldn't put your family and friends into. Now, you have to make sure you do all of those things, right? So first and foremost, it's building the knowledge base of apartments. You need to know apartments better than anybody else, right? In order to say that comfortably, which I can, my agents can. We had a guy on the phone the other day. He was looking at lofts and he goes, I know every loft in Dallas because there aren't a massive amount of them, right? So the second he said that, he immediately gained the trust of the client because he realized, oh wow, this guy knows every single one. 99% of the locators that are calling them or talking about different opportunities aren't going to have the confidence to say that because they know deep down that they don't know it. So do you have a good client? And do you have their trust? And if you don't have one of these two things, there is no way that individual is ever going to turn into a deal with you. And that's the harsh, brutal truth that we've learned from talking to thousands of people, right? No matter how good you think you are, no matter how good your sales is or how much of a hard closer you are, there's gonna be a small percentage of people that you actually have qualified, found exactly what they're looking for, and you have their trust. You will get higher in percentages as you get better, but starting off, that's the most important thing. Do you have a good client and do you have their trust? If you don't have one or two of these things, you really can't move on to the next stage of helping them. So what we found is the difference between somebody that's successful at this and unsuccessful as this is they're able to establish that trust very, very quickly, and they're able to figure out exactly what the client needs and that they're a good client and they're willing to work with them.